Hello everyone, coming to you again with another Classic Movie Monday, and today I wanted to talk about Braveheart. Yes, Braveheart. As you may know, this movie is almost maybe known by the majority of this planet. I'm not sure. I'm sure that there are some that have not heard of Braveheart, but throughout the movie-going community, I think it's understandable to say that a lot of people have heard of and or seen this film. Now, it has been a winner of 5 Academy Awards. It was directed and it stars Mel Gibson, which I thought was interesting because usually in movies, at least the ones that I watch, don't really contain a director actually being in the film. So this was fairly interesting. So I think that was a really cool fact, sort of, that Mel Gibson was the one to direct it. But basically, Braveheart follows the journey of William Wallace. And William Wallace, yes, was an actual Scottish, I guess, legend or person. I don't think it's necessarily clear as to his whole story. I think it's kind of been spread around, and people have come up with various, I guess, interpretations of it. And this is just Mel Gibson's interpretation. And for what it is, I think it is a decent film, a decent classic film. Some people maybe complain that this film is a little bit overrated, that it is a little bit too widespread and too much talked about. And I can understand that some people would think that way. Hi. You shouldn't go close. Huh? Yeah, that's what the clock for tomorrow. Yeah. You too. Sorry, that was just my mom. So basically, I think from what I can tell, I can understand that some people may not like this film for various reasons, and may think that it is a little bit overdone and may not be considered maybe one of the best films of all time. And I think that's fairly understandable. I understand people's concerns. I don't think this is a perfect film. I think it does have issues, but I think what really makes this film stand out in particular is its visuals, in particular with its action sequences. Even today, these action sequences still really impress me. They're really a sort of, I guess, feast to watch because they're just so well orchestrated. And they're very graphic too, in nature, but I think they do serve a purpose into showing us sort of this very primitive world that was sort of Scotland / England during this time period that it takes place. But in case you don't really know the sense of the plot, William Wallace is technically, like I said earlier, is sort of a Scottish legend. And in this interpretation, Mel Gibson plays William Wallace, and basically what William Wallace sort of starts is this sort of rebellion against the English king and sort of his leaders and followers, and basically what he forms is a army of Scotsmen as well as some Irishmen, and they basically just go off and try to sack certain parts that are really under English rule, to sort of liberate them, or I guess liberate the Scottish people. And in doing so trying to push the English back and sort of to give Scotland that sense of freedom. And you'll see how freedom is really, really focused on in this movie. This movie is like full blown like freedom constantly, freedom like freedom this and freedom that. And I think in a sense, Mel Gibson's character William Wallace, I think he is fairly likable. I mean, I think his reaction to certain situations, although they may be gruesome at times, I think is kind of understandable, seeing what kind of happens to him in the beginning. And you'll see sort of in the beginning how some things happen, and these things ultimately lead him to sort of rebel. And I think this is, it pretty much follows sort of that kind of a formula where you see people being ruled, and you see them being oppressed, and it's kind of like, that one guy comes in and sort of leads everybody and sort of takes charge and kind of tells people like, hey, we shouldn't really try to negotiate with these people anymore. We should just fight them off. And that's basically what William Wallace's whole strategy and his whole cause is, and basically what takes up the majority of this film. Issues that could be brought up with in this film. I think, although this may be, I guess, an issue just for me personally, I guess I could say I didn't really like the whole relationship that he has with the princess of France. You'll see how they sort of develop this kind of relationship, and it feels so sudden and so like out of nowhere, kind of, that they're barely in any scenes together at all. And I don't understand why she needed to be put in that kind of a level of a relationship with him, when I didn't think that was really necessary. And you'll kind of see this as the movie goes on. I mean, I think that her being under suppression, because she has her own stuff to deal with, and the fact that she's under the King of England as well as his son, she's kind of like a prisoner from them. So I guess that's why you could say that she really identifies with Wallace in particular. But I don't understand why they needed to make it a romance. I didn't really understand why that was really necessary. It just felt kind of forced and just random. It didn't really hold anything for me. Like, I wasn't really rooting for them. I mean, to me, what I saw, it was just literally like just a friendship almost, not really a romantic relationship. So it was kind of rushed, and I felt it was a little bit sudden, and didn't really make sense to me. I didn't understand why they needed to do that. But again, that might just be me. I'm sure other people wouldn't have a problem with it. But I remember kind of just going, did they really need to do that? Was that really necessary? Probably not. But as far as acting-wise, the acting in this film is fairly good. You get decent performance all around for the most part. Mel Gibson, I think, does a decent job of like giving speeches and kind of being this very very forceful like figure at times. Sometimes scary and intimidating, and other times a little bit more soft and lovable. And I think that's kind of understandable, as you can see through William Wallace's character. And also the antagonist, the King Edward of England, played by Patrick McGoohan, as the antagonist, he does a fairly decent job, I think, of being that kind of stone, cold-hearted king. Again, not a lot of depth here. Not a lot of depth with this villain. This villain in particular is a little bit, how should we say, he doesn't really have layers to him. He's just really stone-right cold-hearted and just kind of, just there's not like a whole lot there that makes you go, I could see where this guy's coming from. You know, somebody like the Joker. This is not a Joker-like antagonist, people. This is a evil, rotten king antagonist who doesn't care, doesn't have a soul, apparently. And not only that, but he's fairly even though the actor does a very decent job in playing him and sort of playing that, you know, cold king who doesn't really care about the Scottish people and probably his people in general. I mean, they make this king seem like he doesn't care and he doesn't have a soul. They really try to make him like, yeah, you're not meant to like this guy, and I think that's understandable. But I think it would have been nice to get at least a little bit more depth from him, but we don't really see it much for the most part. I mean, he's in it for a while, but William Wallace takes up the majority of the film, as well as the Scots. I mean, the Scots are really focused on more than, I think, the Englishmen. Yeah, I think for the most part that's really all I can say about the antagonist. And you will also see by another character named Robert the Bruce, and he's played by Angus McFadden. And basically, his character is, you'll kind of see how his character sort of plays in with the whole politics, because this time period is fairly divided. There's like these, every place has sort of like a village, and sometimes these villages are run maybe by a nobleman or someone of maybe higher power, who maybe is Scottish, but is still controlled by England. And you'll kind of see how these sort of like these really complex politics sort of play in, and I think you'll really sympathize with Robert the Bruce in particular, even though he does do some things that are a little bit shady, and you'll kind of see how that ends up playing out. But he does seem to kind of be the one, I think, with actually the most, I think, really arc in the film, because he seems to change over time and really kind of realize what William Wallace stands for. It seems like William Wallace doesn't really change over time. He just becomes more like freedom, 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 and the antagonist obviously doesn't change either. But it seems like Robert the Bruce seems to kind of evolve and sort of understand, like, okay, you know, this isn't right. I'm going to do what's right now. You'll see this in the film. But really, I think the concepts that this film has going for it are really what I think gets people really invested in it. Especially with a lot of the scenes, especially towards the end. You know, we get the famous scene of freedom, you know, where Mel Gibson yells out freedom, and everybody just gets so worked up and so emotional, and I think that it's fairly understandable. I would understand why people would get worked up about it. I mean, I personally think that this film is a good film, and I would label it as a classic, even though I think it still does have issues. And sometimes even with the fighting, because even though the fight choreography and the battle scenes are really well done, there's also some problems with it too. In particular, there's actually one scene where a fight choreographer, and I remember in high school we had a fight choreographer as part of our sort of tour plan when we went to London, or when we went to New York. And he basically told us, yeah, during Braveheart, we had the one scene, and then if you look really closely, it's really hard to see, but if you look closely, you can see that there's a guy wearing sunglasses in the background during a fight scene. And as you probably know, there are no sunglasses in this in this time period, especially Dark Ages, you know, England, UK, and yeah, I think it's fairly reasonable to understand why that sometimes these things would end up happening. But again, I think that's really the only other really issue that I really saw with this film. I mean, I understand that maybe some people may not like it for various reasons. I don't think it's like the best film of all time, and I'm not saying that any classic that I've put or that I have ever talked about is, but I put it as a classic because it's just so talked about and everybody knows the name of this movie. Everybody has heard at least, you know, a line, and, you know, everybody knows just so much stuff about this movie. So it's hard for me not to, like, just pass it up and not watch it and not review it because, yeah, it's just that prominent. But I think a lot of the prominence in particular comes with the concepts. I think a lot of people really liked the whole concept of freedom and thought that was just very inspiring, and I think that they just liked a film who focused on it and a film that mentions it like constantly. This film does try to put freedom out there, and freedom. This movie should be just called Freedom. I mean, it has heart in it, and they do say brave. They never say Braveheart in the movie. I mean, I did not hear a line where they said, like, Braveheart. But I think the reason why they named that was just because, probably because of, you know, in order to get freedom, you know, you need to have a brave heart or something like that. I think that's maybe the sort of meaning behind that. But I could be wrong. But for the most part, I think what this movie is really trying to do is it's just trying to give you, again, those concepts. And those concepts are just so profound for a lot of people. And I think it's fairly understandable why they would be. And also, not only in the battle scenes are scenes that are worth watching, but as well as the like cinematography as well, like with how you get to see the landscape, and it's really nicely done for the most part. I mean, I think a lot of effort really went into making this film, and I think even if some people may not like it for whatever reasons, I think they can still come from this film and kind of, I guess, appreciate it a bit. But I think for the most part, from what I said, I mean, I think those were the only things that really that I could come up with that were just really kind of off to me. I think maybe some people may not particularly find Mel Gibson's character, William Wallace, to be that appealing. Maybe just because he is fairly, even though he wants freedom, he still kind of has this thing of wanting, you know, kind of revenge. If you double cross him, you know, it's like, you know, you pay. He is a threat. He is threatening in this movie. And it may come off to some people as maybe too threatening. But I think his ends are kind of like his means. I think he's just trying to do these things in order to sort of prove a point, and at the same time try to do things that he thinks will ultimately lead Scotland to freedom. That's, I think, really the whole point behind his character. But as far as so much other depth is concerned, I think he is a good character. I just don't think he has any. He doesn't really undergo any change, or and I think they're just meant to be these characters to sort of represent something rather than being sort of memorable characters. Again, I think I don't think really people remember so much this film just because of Mel Gibson, but also the things that sort of surround Mel Gibson, and that because of his circumstances, he's able to, be able to do all these things. I think that's what people usually take away from it, as well as the lines and the scenes that can be very powerful and very awe-inspiring. But I definitely would recommend anybody who has not seen this film to watch it, if you are considering to watch it. But I really think that's all I can say about it without giving too much away. But his whole point is just to lead Scotland along this freedom path, and you'll see in the beginning what really motivates him and drives him in order to reach that goal. And it sort of ends with this very powerful, emotionally gripping film that gives you a sense of what freedom is about, and sort of addressing freedom from the standpoint of William Wallace's character, as well as the other characters that are in the movie too. But I think that's really all I can say about this film. Any questions, comments, concerns, I'm more than happy to answer them. And until next time, bye-bye, everybody.